Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, that slogan certainly applies to today's show. It's kind of a special show for ways because normally I have been doing a lot of business with nonprofit shows and local politics, local government, things of that nature. But the premise of this show originally was, as the title says, you're entitled to my opinion, which I say that with tongue in cheek because it's, everybody has their own opinion. But the premise of the show originally, when I started this in September of 2019, was to talk about these kind of very issues we're going to talk about today, which is the current situation with our federal government and our nation as a whole. And over the years, it's kind of morphed over, evolved over into the shows that we see more of now. But still, the very basic premise of the show was this kind of show. And as much as I would have liked to have avoided it, I would like to avoid it entirely because it's an unpleasant conversation with so many people these days. I really felt like I couldn't be true to the premise unless I at least addressed some of the anxieties and some of the arguments and some of the anger that's going on about the current actions of Mr. Trump. And like I said, it's an opinion. I hope it's based in somewhat in history and fact and whatnot. But if you have a counter opinion, please drop a note in the comments and we can debate that or support that or whatever it is. Anyway, Josh is here, man, the controls. If I understand, Taylor's over at Project U, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I'm looking at a picture from him right now of Project U going on. And, it looks like a lot of fun over there. I know this is a big day for the city of Burleson. It's one of the best things the city does.
Yeah.
So there you are. Also, we're not going to run any ads today. I'm going to make that point up front, too. We're not running any ads because I want this to be my opinion, and I don't want to imply that this is also an opinion supported by the sponsors. They have their own ideas on things, and they're, if they want you to know them, you can ask them. But they support this show, but they don't necessarily everything I say they're 100% behind, and that's fine. They support this show because they like what it does for the community. They think it provides information, whatever else. They're good citizens. They want to provide a platform for the nonprofits, but I did not want to imply that this is the viewpoints I'm about to express are endorsed by the sponsors, nor am I putting this on community radio. I've been putting my podcast on community radio. I will not be doing this one because I want that to be a politics-free zone, so to speak. I want people to be able to listen to radio and not have to worry about it. We get enough of that already. And, and so there you are. Now, speaking of the radio, yesterday's Harvest House show will be on 1 o'clock today. And then Jennifer Woods, when she comes with her Roots and Reflections presentation Thursday, that will be on the radio, but not this because I don't want people to... I just don't want to associate it with a political viewpoint. I want it to be a public information source and good music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Josh, do you worry about what's going on in this world?
All the time, yeah.
Okay. So, I talk to other people, and I've never seen the level of anxiety like I've seen about the government. I've seen times when we had concerns, like after 9/11, after the crash in 2008, and they were concerned about their personal situation. They were concerned about, the economics of it. But as far as the future of the country and what this government's doing, I haven't seen that before. All right, which camera am I going to be looking at, Josh, just to make sure? Let's look at this one. That looks good. Okay. Hey, it's good. All right, good-looking guy, too. Anyway, so let's just get started. First of all, one of the arguments that kind of drives me a little nutty is the argument of whataboutism. In other words, every time something that Trump does or something Obama did or Biden did, the other side would say, well, what about, and they'd say, and they would use some other failing or other bad policy that the other side committed as a rebuttal to what the current policy was or the current action was. Whataboutism, what drove me crazy about that is that whataboutism is not a good basis to make policy. Just because Biden did it doesn't mean Trump should counteract that. Bad policy is bad policy. Whataboutism doesn't create good policy by rebutting the previous policy. If Biden's policy was bad, that doesn't mean Trump's policy is good. should be judged individually on its merits and its intents and its goals and how it came about and all this. Just because Mr. Biden did this doesn't mean if Trump does that, then that is good or smart. It has to be evaluated on its own. And that's gone on for years. You know, and they'd say, well, the other side did this, therefore we're entitled to do that. Well, this kind of tit for tat thing has got us to where we are now. And that's not a good thing. The idea that the other side did it, by definition, it's wrong, therefore I will counteract that. It has led to this whipsaw type of government back and forth every 4 years. Our government is in very, very serious trouble, and not just because of Mr. Biden or Mr. Trump, but because, as my thesis, if you will, for today will be because Congress has abdicated totally its job. But that's a point I'll make towards the end. But the point is our government has been in bad shape long before Mr. Trump or even before Mr. Biden or Mr. Obama got into office. But it's getting worse. I've been dealing with this subject since I've been an adult, and I've taught it since 1988. At various levels, all the way from 7th grade to Dallas Baptist University. And it's the worst, it's in its worst shape ever in terms of its budget, in terms of its politics, in terms of its functionality, in terms of its service. It's the worst it's ever been, period. And we could, in the idea that the current situation is all Mr. Trump's fault, isn't valid. But nor is it valid that it was all Mr. Biden's fault. This is a long-term problem, and now we're reaping the results of this. So when people say, well, when they criticize Mr. Trump for policy A and they respond with, well, Biden did this, fine. They didn't justify what Biden did, but it doesn't make what Trump did in response the right policy. So I'll repeat this. Whataboutism isn't the basis for policy. Policy has to be based on the facts and the needs and the situation at that time, not just a reaction to what somebody else did in a previous administration. But that's what's happening, and not just today, in February 18th of 2025, but this has been going on for a little while longer. Now, the thing about it is, you look at some of the things that Trump has done. I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, and my response was, he's taken what needs to be done with a scalpel, he's doing with a sledgehammer. There are things that really did and do need revision in this policy, in this government, and in its policies. There are areas in which tremendous amount of waste and poor, efficient economic services are making this government ungovernable. Mr. Nickel here, Ben Nickel, says Democrats started political warfare, and that's what I'm seeing on the other side now. The thing is, Ben, if somebody on the other side of the political spectrum would say, just put Republicans where you put Democrats and say the same thing. But it is true, I think, that both sides are equally at fault. And, because if I said, well, the Democrats started this because of the way they treated Trump, the Democrats said, well, you see how they treated Obama? Oh, yeah, well, see how they treated W. Bush? Oh, yeah, and they tried to impeach Bill Clinton. So we go back and forth, and really at this point it doesn't really matter. Now, only one prosecuted the other. That's true. But I will be addressing the Department of Justice issue later in the show. Now, as far as some of the issues, what got Trump elected was some of the just completely erratic and failed policies of Mr. Biden. That doesn't mean that Trump's solutions to them are always the best. But there's no question we could not have allowed the immigration policy to go on as is. There was no question that the immigration issue was destabilizing this country because of the misplaced priorities of the majority of the Democrats in Congress and a president who thought himself as a new FDR. I don't have a problem with a strict, more closed border. It doesn't mean we have to treat them inhumanely or anything like that. But it does. But the problem was it was indicative of how poor our government was functioning when we literally had millions of undocumented and unknown number of aliens in our country, and we don't really know how many came in that 4-year period and have escaped any kind of notice. We just know the official numbers that were given. Also, other issues, we could not continue to spend like we had been. Now, again, I'll be addressing that particular issue as well, because when we talk about trying to cut spending, what's the purpose of Mr. Trump's cutting spending is not what I wish it was, but there you go. But the problem is, for a lot of people, is that Mr. Trump has come in and he's wholesale eliminating agencies and wants to eliminate wholesale departments and things of that nature. And it's hard not to justify this. All right. Mr. Nickel also says, I haven't seen this level of fear over immigration ever. It's not even an increase in numbers of deportations, but the messaging around it. The Valentine's Day tweet by the White House was horrible. Yes, it was. But the issues that got Mr. Trump elected were legitimate in some ways because, we couldn't go on like we had been. However, now we're going 180 degrees, 100 miles an hour the other direction in certain cases. I don't have a problem with some of deporting some of these immigrants that are literally a social or criminal threat to the cities. And people that don't believe that also don't live in Chicago or New York, and they see it from a distance and they think maybe that's inhumane or whatever else. But the truth also is something had to be done. Also, the spending was incredibly wasteful. I was looking up some of the COVID waste, for example, and the COVID programs over the course of its tenure, they spent, between the two administrations, they spent $4.2 trillion on COVID relief, and $280 billion of that went to fraudulent accounts. $123 billion was just flat out wasted. And so the problem is that Mr. Trump is addressing is there. It just, how is he addressing it has got everybody so concerned. One of those concerns is that Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk. You've heard this quite often. Who elected Elon Musk? I, too, am uncomfortable having Elon Musk having access to personal information. Okay? The purpose of the Department of Government Efficiency, trying to find waste and fraud and all this other business, is something that Congress should be doing. That's my real complaint about Elon Musk. It isn't so much him doing it. It's the fact that he's been brought in to do it because Congress does not. Congress has the authority and the constitutional obligation to monitor these agencies and to control their budgets and write their budgets and to find out these kind of inefficiencies and waste and whatever else. But they won't do it. All right. And that's why we led to nearly 10% of our COVID funds overall, nearly $400 billion going out the window to fraudulent accounts all over the world. There's all these stories about fraudulent accounts being set up in foreign countries like China and India in particular and receiving billions of dollars of COVID funding. Why? Because we were incredibly inefficient. And Congress does not do its job. And that's why some of your anger should be misplaced. It is misplaced, should be changed and placed on Congress, and not just on Trump or Biden, if you will. But the fact is that the presidents have all this authority, not because of the Constitution, not because of political mandates from the people, but because Congress is a collection of cowards that won't do their job and haven't for years. I'm sure individually, most members of Congress are very pleasant people. Who cares? They don't do their job. And the thing about it is they're blatantly hypocritical when their president of their party is the president. The Democrats said nothing about all this waste and abuse and whatever else when Biden was president. And the Republicans aren't saying anything about what Trump is doing. Well, and a couple of the most egregious characters for his cabinet. Robert F. Kennedy is not qualified to be the head of the HHS. His stance on vaccines alone eliminates it, but he also, from a Republican point of view, he's been pro-choice up until he wasn't 6 months ago. Okay? And now he's in charge of the agency that would be overseeing those issues. As late June, right before the famous debate, Robert F. Kennedy called Trump the worst president in history. That is a quote. And now he's the head of the largest agency in the government. Okay? And so that's what we're talking about. The Republicans, they just rolled right over in the Senate, except for Mitch McConnell, which is, to me, too little too late. All right. But they just rolled over and allowed him to become HHS secretary. And that's the whole point. Neither party will stand up to their own president. If it weren't for Joe Manchin standing up to Joe Biden, we would have spent about 3 times what that egregiously named Inflation Reduction Act was going to spend. They were going to spend on the Build Back Better bill. It was passed around $1.5 trillion. They were going to spend it to $6 trillion had Joe Manchin not stopped it. And had Joe Manchin not and Kirsten Sinema not stopped the abuse of the filibuster, changed the filibuster rule to allow certain things to be passed, there'd have been nothing stopping the party. But the Democrats didn't stand up, just like the Republicans now are just rolling over. The same issues they were screaming about when it comes to government inefficiencies, they're willing to overlook. Or practices, maybe is a better word, not inefficiencies, but practices. And I want to take a side note. People say we need to run the business like a government. No, we don't. We're not here to make a profit. All right? But we are here to run it efficiently and economically. The government's not here to turn a profit. It's here to provide a service. But it doesn't mean it's exempt from economic restraints and efficiency rules. And that's what Congress is for. The Congress has been given by the Constitution very clearly in Article in Section 8 all these various powers, and yet they exercise almost none of them. And, Mr. Nichols says, I think you underestimate the amount of support the new Republican Party has given to RFK Jr. I don't know if anyone that likes Mitch McConnell. I don't care. I'm still right. All right, I'll put it that way. It didn't matter if the majority of the Republican Party are okay with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They're wrong because he's not the man for the job. And anybody that doesn't like Mitch McConnell, fine, I get it. But McConnell voted the right way this time. But he also was quiet enough when Trump was doing some of his shenanigans, and then he was raising hell when Obama or Biden was in office. So as far as the amount of support, fine, great, that'd make it right. All right, and so that's part of it. Now, again, I'll go back to the Department of Government Efficiency. This is what Congress should be doing. And to be clear, the DOGE, the Doge, or whatever you want to call it, is finding inefficiencies. I mean, there's been a meme scrolling through Facebook about all these people on Social Security that are like 150 years old. And that's from their spokesperson. Well, I don't know the exact numbers, but there is no question there are people on Social Security that are dead, supposedly, or they're not supposed to be getting it, or they're fictional accounts, or, they're not people, or they're not citizens even. But we're talking about made up names and made up personalities, made up Social Security numbers and whatever else, and they're getting, it's fraud. There's no question that we're spending money on Social Security on fraudulent accounts, but that's what the Congress was supposed to do. The agencies that deal with that are supposed to root that out, and they're so inefficient and so badly done that they're not doing it. And then, so whose fault is it? Well, it's the agencies, but it also, Congress has stepped in and said, we demand better. And not pontificate for a committee hearing and then go back to their business, or pontificate during a committee hearing and then go on Fox News and raise hell about it. We expect our Congress to monitor and to hold people accountable for this kind of fraud. And then you're going through these other things, the Doge. Let's take USAID, for example. USAID is controversial because what it's intended to do is provide quite often the means of sustenance and support to people in third world countries that really needed it, food, medicine, etc. And who isn't buying that? Most people are. But then also, like all government agencies, it branched into policy making that was not part of the original mandate. They went from providing food and medicine and support and whatnot into social engineering, if you will, or other politically based ideologies and programs. One of the most silly ones I thought was USAID spent $20 million to create Sesame Street for Iraqi children. Now, okay, why? And some of these other things that they're spending money on. And so what happens is USAID, who doesn't have a natural constituency. In other words, there's not a large number of people that even knew what USAID was until it was on the chopping block. There's not a lot of people screaming about it being eliminated because it didn't affect them personally, they don't think. I will be interested to see just how much stomach for the fight most Republicans and Democrats will have for that matter, when they start looking at things that are closer to home, like the Pentagon's budget. I really want to see what happens in like with Cruz and Cornyn when Musk tells Lockheed we only need half the number of F-35s you're building, so you might have to lay off a few people. We'll see how far that goes. Okay. Same thing with the Democrats when they start, cutting into agencies and funding that they hold dear. Let's see how far that goes. And so, but the point is about the Doge. It is finding waste and just terrible inefficiencies. People who object to Elon Musk doing it, I understand. But here's an interesting side note: the about 17 or 18 attorneys general of the states filed suit against what Musk is doing, and there's going to have a court hearing today as we speak. I may have already had it, but it was supposed to be today on February 18th in Washington D.C. and where a judge is going to rule, do these attorneys general have a case? It's ironic is that the judge listening to the case is Obama appointee named Tanya Jutkin. And if that name sounds familiar, Judge Jutkin was supposed to be the judge that was going to oversee the case about January 6th and Trump's involvement, et cetera. And then the case got dropped, okay? The speculation is strong that she's going to rule in favor of the DOGE. Why? Because the president has the ability to make these kind of appointments. Is it, again, I'll say this again, is this the best we could do? No. But, it's very likely that this is going to continue. Now, on to other things. We look at another agency rather that's on the chopping block, supposedly, is the Department of Education. I am no fan of the Department of Education, but that doesn't mean all its functions are illegitimate. And so rather than smashing it to pieces and for it to go away, we should analyze this in a much more rational and thoughtful way. And if people say, well, the politics won't allow that, then there's something wrong with our politics, and we shouldn't bellyache too much. The point is about the Department of Education. There's some things that need to be done. We still have $400 billion in school loans that need to be administered. The government's going to administer them somehow. Eliminating the Department of Education doesn't make $400 billion of subsidized loans go away. Some of the things that the Department of Education does in terms of funding and whatnot are helpful in terms of technologies and in terms of personnel. But the problem, again, was the original purpose of the Department of Education was to support local decision-making, not to take it over. And that's what happened. And I'll give you one example that still sticks in my craw about the Obama administration. When they began to impose certain social policies in the Department of Education, such as that discipline issues and discipline codes can be subject to civil rights violations and lawsuits by the federal government if it was seen to be unfairly applied. And what that meant was because so many districts, and including Burleson, and I heard this straight from the horse's mouth, were so concerned about being tied up in court about at the application of their policies that they basically just stood down. And so a lot of the complaints you have about public schools, about the discipline, about the lack of respect and whatever else, yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that other than Mr. Obama's policies. But that accelerated it because now schools had their hands tied. They didn't know how to deal with certain educational or rather discipline issues because they were afraid that whatever status the student involved could claim that would lead to legal action. And most districts don't have the pockets for that or the stomach for it, to be frank. So there you are. My point is, we're taking a sledgehammer to something that needs maybe to be surgically altered, but not destroyed completely. But there you are. Same thing with Social Security. I'll go back to that and about all this fraudulent. We need to go back and really dig into this and see if these are fraudulent accounts and see where the money's going. But why is it taking this? Why has it gotten to this point? Again, I'll go back to my original point. Congress is at fault for not doing its job. Same thing with the tariffs. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the first specific power given to Congress is to levy taxes. Tariffs are a congressional issue, but they gave that over to the president a long time ago, not just to Biden or Trump, but a while back. And they basically said it's up to you to do whatever you want with tariffs. That's not the division of powers. That's Congress's job. It's Congress's job to pass and set those tariffs and then the president to enforce them, not to give him the authority to arbitrarily put one on Mexico or Canada or anybody else he feels like. Now, you say, well, wait a minute. It may end up with good results. The thing is, when it comes to government policy, I want to say this clearly, and I'll say this again, the means do not justify the ends. There's a lot of things that we would like to see done, but the means to do it has to be within the bounds of law and Constitution. And there are things that the previous three presidents have done that have exceeded that. And the reason they got away with that, A, their party let them get away with it, and B, the American people said, well, that's a necessary thing, so who cares how it got done? I care how it got done because it's led to what we're talking about today, and that is the arbitrary use of power by our presidents. And I say that in plural, not just Trump. The arbitrary power of our presidents has been given to them by Congress. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce. But not anymore, because they gave that to the president. And so if they want to impose, all these various other restrictions or policy mandates on how people do business, that's up to the president now, because Congress gave that up. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, the power to declare war. We haven't declared war in 82 years, yet obviously we've been fighting them. Okay, so the Congress has been totally AWOL on all this whole thing. And as far as the media, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to get too far ahead. But so many of these things that we blame the president at the time, at least half the country does, blames the president at the time for, he's just getting away with what has been given. To me, the presidents, particularly in the last 15 years, are like kids I had in high school sometimes. I didn't have many of these, but I had some that had zero discipline at home, zero discipline in their lives in any case. So to expect them to behave themselves in the classroom is kind of illogical. The presidents are going to do as much as they can, as far as they can, as far as they're allowed. Madison talks about this clearly in Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers are brilliant, and because they understood not just government, but human nature. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Enlightened statesmen may not always be at the helm. These kind of thoughts made our government. It is the Federalist Papers understood human nature, and that power is something that will accumulate if left unchecked. That power will go to whoever is most aggressive in getting it. And if it's left unchecked, the more powerful that person or that group becomes. Congress was meant to check the power of the president. The president's original job, as seen by the founding fathers, was to faithfully execute the laws of Congress. He was to be pretty much superior in foreign policy and dealing with foreign nations, but when it comes to domestic concerns, they were to act and enforce the laws of Congress. And Congress has given that all away. And so now the presidents are naturally going to assume as much power. And here's a few quotes from the last three presidents, all right? For example, this is one that stuck in my craw and still does. 2019, Mr. Biden's bragging to a bunch of donors about the school loan decision. Well, the Supreme Court tried to stop me, but I did it anyway. Okay. Name me something that Trump has said that just is bad. I could tell you there is some. Or how about some other quotes from Mr. Obama? We don't have to wait for Congress to do these things. It's from 2013. I have a pen and a phone, also from 2013. Now, Mr. Trump, has made all these other statements, and people are going crazy about it. But again, this is not just something that's happened in 2025. This has been going on for a while, and we're now paying the price for a Congress that will not do its job and will not put the people ahead of its own party. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, most bills that passed through the House of Representatives had at least some bipartisan support. Now, none. It's all party line votes in both houses. The Senate used to be a place where bills were modified and moderated, and not anymore. It's just strictly party line votes. And it's such a blood sport competition in Congress that any inch of ground that one party gives the other is seen as a loss, and they got to deal with it with donors and interest groups. That any amount of compromise that's beneficial to the country is unthinkable because it might cost me donors, or it might cost me a spot on Fox News or MSNBC, or I might get criticized, or I might get primaried. You know, Mr. Trump has threatened all these Republicans who aren't on board, they'll be primaried if they don't come on board. That's a disgrace. But the Democrats did the same thing. They primaried Kirsten Sinema, and they basically were told Joe Manchin not to run again, even though I think they were probably the kind of moderate Democrats this country could use. And we could use more moderate Republicans, but they've either caved to the inevitable or they're out of office. All right? As far as the media, it's easy to blame the media, but I do believe it's the worst it's ever been in terms of partisanship. And it doesn't merely matter which media you're talking about. People are so dialed in on their own form of media. There are people that will watch nothing but MSNBC or nothing but Fox, and they're not getting the whole story. But then again, if they went to the other side, they're not going to get the whole story there either. Okay, you look at, for example, I made a comparison. Let's look at some of the firings of the government agencies, some of the firing of the people. 2 points I'd make. One is it a bad thing or sad thing when somebody gets laid off? Well, of course it is. Just today in the Dallas Morning News, and one of the headlines is that Southwest Airlines is going to lay off 1,750 people. Okay, and that's just as unfortunate for them as it is for the government employees that are being laid off. But you read the New York Times and you're reading these terrible stories about how people are being thrown out in the snow and all this other business. They're not mentioning a word about the fact that a lot of the money is being just wasted in government. Then you go to Fox and you see all the money that's supposedly being found that's been fraudulent, but there's not a word being said about the condition of the situation, the people that are being thrown out with everything else. There's no balance there. We need to balance this out. Some of these jobs need to be eliminated, but it doesn't mean that they need to be, ignored. But the point is that if you read the New York Times solely or NBC News, you would never known. You'd never know that Doge actually is finding out that we're wasting money on things and spending money on frivolous things or ideologically based things that a lot of people don't support. But you listen to Fox and you make it sound like that's all they're doing is finding nothing but waste, when really, it doesn't talk about the level of service that a lot of the government provides. And if people think that the level of government service is poor, call your insurance company and try to work out that deal. Wait, you ain't seen bureaucracy till you try to get a new roof or getting your health care bill paid. Okay? So let's not go down that avenue that by definition government service is inefficient and bad because, every time I have some sort of technical issue and I get to call somebody and I can barely understand it, that's not good service. I'm calling somebody in a foreign country. Is that good service? I don't think so. So we can't reserve that complaint strictly for government. But I'm just disgusted with the media. One of the reasons, among others, I'm not that upset that my show has evolved to what it is now, to where I do a lot of local stuff and nonprofit and business, and events that are coming, and and what's going on at the school district, and the state and local taxes and all that. Reason I'm not that upset about it is because I'm really get to the point where I'm just full up to the brim with national stuff. The egregious bias in the media, the complete abdication of any kind of objectivity. Here's an example that really stuck in my craw. Ms. Margaret Brennan of Meet the Press was having a debate with Marco Rubio, and our Vice President, Mr. Vance, had said something in Germany about how they need to, embrace more free speech, which they took as a sign for embracing some of the far-right rhetoric that's going on in Germany. And she comes out and says, well, free speech led to the Holocaust in Germany. I thought, what the hell kind of comment is that free speech led to the Holocaust? First of all, Nazi Germany didn't have free speech. But the fact that free speech it directly relates to a massacre of 6 million people. That's crazy. But that's what they say. Why? Because Vance said it. You know, CBS is, I won't watch CBS. They're the worst. Of the three major networks, they're the worst. NBC's Nightly News with Lester Holt is passable, but other than that, you know, I don't much use for it. I don't watch the talk shows on any channel because it's not, is it a lie? It is a very shaded truth that we're getting. And I'm reading this on Facebook, guys. This is what bothers me. I'm getting, but my Facebook page is getting filled with both sides who are like, where are you getting this information? Is it a lie? Not really, but it's also much out of context. It's much distorted. It's not from an objective news source. You know, I see people that are going off the chain about Mr. Trump and where are they getting this information? Well, you know, far left publications and whatnot. And then people that think Trump is walking on water, where are they getting it? Far right material, Breitbart and other material, and other sites similar to that. And so so here we are. You know, I kind of rambled a bit. I did have, you know, an agenda of sorts, an outline, but not really, didn't use it that much. But now we're in a situation, but because our U.S. Congress will not do what they need to do, we're in a situation where the powers of government can be brought upon the American people. Miss Tiffany Basham says, the news and social media can definitely make everyone panic with all the chaos they post, but Mr. Allard's neighborhood will tell us the truth. Blessings upon you, Miss Basham. Okay. I'll agree with that. I like that statement, as they say in Facebook land. But here's the thing. Ben mentioned earlier, Ben Nickel mentioned earlier about the prosecution of Mr. Trump. There's no question the Department of Justice has been weaponized. Okay, there's no that whoever is in administration is going to use it against their political opponents. Even Biden, even if he didn't mean to say it, said so when he was bellyaching about how his son was being prosecuted by the Department of Justice in an unjust and partisan Department of Justice. Wait a minute, it's your administration, Mr. Biden. But he said, and when he pardoned his nitwit son, that he did so because it was due to a partisan witch hunt. Because you were the people who put those in place. I don't understand that. But now we have Mr. Trump. He's going after people, and he made a terrible mistake in pardoning some of the January 6th rioters. Okay, some of them that were basically there and walk around Capitol, they had no business being there. Okay, some served their time, got pardoned. Okay, whatever. But those that assaulted cops and inflicted injury and threatened members of Congress, no thank you. They don't deserve to be impeached. Or rather, I'm sorry, pardoned. Did I say impeached? It's on my mind. I don't know. They don't deserve to be pardoned. Okay? And going after no more than Biden had the authority to not just pardon his son. That was a bad idea. Did he have the authority? Technically, yes. But now he pardoned people that hadn't even been investigated for crimes. And, but again, where were the Democrats when he pardoned all those people without even being under investigation? Mumble, mumble, mumble. Where were the Republicans that, before the pardons were given, said he should not pardon people that had assaulted the police if we're really going to be a law and order party? Well, mumble, mumble, mumble. That's why I'm so frustrated. All right. I'm frustrated because you and I and 90% of the people in this country know what should be happening. We may differ on policy. We may differ on political goals and ideals, but we know how our government should be working. And it isn't just because they had my class. Thank you very much. It's also because we know in our bones, okay, we know in our bones what is right and wrong under our system. And when we have a government that justifies anything they do because the ends justify the means, or political agendas or political goals, then we get what we got right now. It's easy to blame the American people for doing this, but honestly, I really don't blame them that much. Why? Because they're only subject to a limited amount of power, their vote, I suppose, but also They are subject to all the inundation of news and propaganda and social media and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to compete against that. And so a lot of people drop out. My show, when I originally started doing political shows, I had a lot of comments on it. Now I don't get very many at all. Why? Because people are dropping out. There used to be a lot more debates and politics and junk on Facebook. Some of it pretty, unfortunately, not pleasant. Now, not so much. Why? Because people are dropping out. They're just overwhelmed, and they think, I'm one person. What can I do? I get it. This is my way of doing something about it, I suppose, but I just was in the right position, the right place at the right time to do it. But the point is that we know what should be happening. We know how to solve these problems. But somebody's ox going to get gored. We know how to solve Social Security and Medicare's problems. But somebody somewhere is going to, be inconvenienced. Some interest group, some economic entity is not going to get what they think they deserve or want, and whatever else. We know how to solve the Medicare problem, but we're not going to do it because somebody somewhere has enough power, enough money, enough interest group persuasion, and the ability to persuade you to believe that what the government's doing is wrong. And so we don't solve that problem. We know how to solve Social Security. It may not be a good solution for some, but to keep it solvent, it may have to happen. But the AARP isn't going to be on board with that. And they're going to convince you that what they're doing is wrong, and therefore we don't have access to all the information, so we don't know what to do. We know how to solve the immigration problem, but we're not going to do it under these circumstances. Why? Because somebody somewhere is going to be inconvenienced. Somebody somewhere is going to be cost some money. And we can't have that happen. The big donors, the big interest groups, the lobby groups, they're there to make sure that they're taken care of and the American people can just drop dead. Period. So I'm going to sum this up. We are in a world of hurt. When I see my, quote, liberal friends upset, I know why they're upset, and their feelings are legitimate. I'm not here to tell them that they're wrong. I'm here to tell them that your feelings and your fears are legitimate. And to those that they were doing the same thing during the Biden administration, your fears and concerns were legitimate and are legitimate. I had a lot of problems with the Biden administration, and my fears and concerns were legitimate, and so were yours. And for those that see Mr. Trump as an existential threat to this country, I would say to them, he is not the cause of the problems. He's the symptom. He is the result of the problems caused by an abdication of Congress and a media that is more concerned and more driven by ideology than they are about the objective news, the objective truth. I'll say that again. Mr. Obama, Mr. Biden, Mr. Trump are all the results, not the causes of all our problems. Our real problem was the style of government that was put into place by our founding fathers has been short-circuited by politicians that don't give two damns about what happens to the other side, that all they're concerned about is not being primaried and getting reelected, that we are getting short-circuited by interest groups that are so narrowly focused that they don't give two damns if it's bad policy as long as it satisfies their client or their interest group. And we have a media that doesn't give two damns whether or not it's the truth or not. They're just trying to keep the share values high and the ratings high. And sometimes to get the ratings high, you got to be a little bit more flamboyant and a little scandalous. And we in the middle get crunched. So I'm going to sum up with this. I want to say this again. To both sides of this issue, to those, the quote, and I use these in quotes, conservative and quote, liberal friends of this show, friends of Facebook, friends in our community, what you're watching and the fears it brings about in the last few years are justified. And they are the concerns you have, and the concerns I see on Facebook, the concerns I've had on private messages, whatever else. they're justified. They're not to be. They should not be blown off as, oh, you're just exaggerating. You're just overreacting. No, you're not. Is there a solution to this problem? Today, I don't have one. Election day, maybe. And if we continue to elect from both parties these cretins, I guess that's how you pronounce it, these cretins, these self-centered, dialed-in ideologues, then we're going to continue to get what we get. H.L. Mencken, the great satirist, said, democracy is where people know it's good for them and they get it good and hard. And we're getting it good and hard because we keep electing from both parties these self-seeking people that draw their own districts so they can get reelected over and over again. They don't have to consider one iota about what's going on except for that narrow group that gets them into power and keeps them there. I'm concerned about this country a great deal. I can't tell you how hard it is these days to teach government classes because I get up there and I talk about this is what it's supposed to be, but here's what it really is. And you don't really want to use the classroom for that kind of platform. They're there to understand or get it, not to be lectured to by some old coot like me about, what's on his mind that day. But it's getting harder. It really is getting harder to teach government classes because you know what the standard, what the ideal is and how so far we are from it and how we don't even seem to care how far we are from it at the national level and at the state level too. I mean, I'm no fan of Mr. Paxton or Mr. Patrick at all. I could say, even though I've been a Republican for most of my voting life, I've never cast a vote for them in any capacity, and I won't. And that's the deal. I mean, people, they ask me these questions. They think I'm a representative of the Republican Party. I am not. I'm still pretty conservative. My ideals haven't changed that dramatically. They have modified in certain ways, yes. There are certain issues I think a little differently than I did when I was 30. Thankfully, I do. There's certain issues that I probably understand better and maybe have altered my thinking somewhat along those understandings, and maybe life's experiences have changed some of my harder views, if you will, or some of my more black and white views into more of a gray area because of what my profession and what's gone on in my life have shown that my black and white view doesn't work on every issue. But I don't really have a party anymore. And I can't tell you how many people said that on both parties. I know Democrats that say the same thing. They may be, quote, more liberal than I, but they're not like the far left at all. And they don't feel like they have a home anymore in the Democrat Party. Same thing with the Republicans. Most of the Republican people I know are still conservative, but they're like, these people don't represent me anymore. They're too far to the right. And so you got these polarized Congress, polarized politics has created a polarized public. And a great deal of us just kind of, we don't know what to do. I don't have a party anymore. I'm still adhere to a lot of the conservative ideas that I had when you first met me. But I don't have a party that represents that. And I have 2 or 3 very good friends, dear friends that are Democrats, and they feel the same way about their party. And I have concerns. I wish I could give you the answer. It'd be nice and easy, but you got enough people in public life saying they got the answer. I don't have it. All I could say is this is a great country, but it's not well governed. But this country is not our government. The country is us. We are the country. All the different diversities that make up this country, all the different races and groups and ethnicities, etc. We are the country, not our government. And as long as that is the truth, then we're going to survive. As long as we as a people treat each other as fellow citizens, brothers and sisters, and not make distinctions about who's a real American, who's not. That we don't say he's less of American because he voted differently than I, that he's mentally or morally deficient because he voted differently than I. As long as the people hold together and understand that our differences are not to be fought with hammers and tongs, but basically with ideas. That we embrace the idea that we are a country of diversity and different peoples who are entitled to live their lives in peace and security, even if those lifestyles are not something we would endorse, even if those lifestyles are not something that we would adopt ourselves. Who cares? We are the people that make this country what it is, not our government. And we need to remember that. And that's about all I got for today. I had a couple of people that have been texting in or calling, but I'm not going to answer the phone call in the middle of the show, certainly. Just a brief program note. Jennifer Woods will be on Thursday. Yeah, that's right. 11 o'clock Thursday. I hope you see it because she has something really nice to offer. And I think it'll be something worth hearing. Roots and Reflections, because end-of-life planning is very important. Next week, I'm going to look at I'll save that for next Thursday. I could do the stuff. All right. And I appreciate Ben and Miss Basham, Tiffany Basham, to their comments into it. Mr. Nickel adds one last thing. We may be the country, but they have the power. No, they don't, Ben. We have the power. No. Oh, no. We have the power. We just need to use it. And that's my final thought. Thank you, Josh, for enduring this diatribe.
No, it was good.
You liked it?
Yeah, it was really good.
Okay. Is that why you're wiping the tears from your eyes?
Oh, yeah, just sobbing back here. Don't mind me. That's why I had to go on mute.
Okay. All right. I'll see you all Thursday.